Today on Hebrew Grammar Help, I'm going to talk about a little bit of this and a little bit of that. Welcome back to Hebrew Grammar Help. I'm Sapir, and today I'm going to be talking about demonstratives, which are words like this and that and these and those. It's not very complicated, but there are some differences between the Hebrew and the English. So let's get started. Just like in English, these words can be a pronoun taking the full place of a noun, or they can be something of an adjective going with the noun, as in this video or these computers. In English, they're not really adjectives, they're more like determiners. They act more like the word the, which is also not an adjective. It's what linguists call a determiner. But in Hebrew, they act very much like adjectives. They match in gender and in number, just like adjectives. They go after the noun, just like other adjectives. And if there is a he hayediah, a definite article on the noun, there is also one on this demonstrative, just like happens with other adjectives. So let's look at the different forms first, and then we'll look at some uses. The near demonstratives are those that are near to the speaker. So in English, we use this for the singular and these for plural. In Hebrew, there are 4 forms, of course, because Hebrew nouns come in 2 genders, and then, of course, there are 2 numbers. So we have ze for masculine, and zot or zo or zu for feminine. So I guess there are really 5 or 6 forms. There isn't really a difference between zot and zo and zu. They're used exactly in the same situations, except that there might be some expressions where I've heard zot but never zo or zu. But that could also be that I've just never heard it. I want you to pay attention to how zot is spelled. There is an aleph in the middle and not a vav. And this might look confusing, but it's a really common word, so you will get used to it. At first, people look at it, and when they forget that they know this word, they try to say like za'at or za'et, but it's just zot. And in typical non-nikud writing, you cannot tell the difference between zo and zu. People say it how they want, and it all basically means the same thing. And zo and zu, you're never going to get confused between those two. The plural forms are ele for the masculine and elu for the feminine. But this elu for feminine is super, super technical. Most people do use ele for both masculine and feminine nouns. Also, notice that ele with a hey at the end is not the same as this word, ella, with an aleph at the end. Ella is a conjunction that doesn't really have an equivalent in English. It's kind of like but or but rather. If you know Spanish, ella is just like the Spanish sino. And if you know German, it's just like the word sondern. But this video is not about this word. I just want you to recognize that there is a word ele with a hey and a word ella with an aleph, and it's the ele with the hey that is the plural demonstrative. Now, for objects or situations that are far away from the speaker, we use the subject pronouns. These are harder to identify when they are on their own as a demonstrative, because they can just as easily be the subject pronoun. So if I hear someone say, hi uga yafa, in my head, I think that means it is a beautiful cake, rather than that is a beautiful cake. And I think in Hebrew, ze and zot are used a lot more commonly than the word that in English. So whereas in English, if I might say that is a beautiful cake, In Hebrew, I might just say zot uga yafa. Sometimes these variations between something like ze and hu or zot and he they're difficult to pin down as to whether they are just stylistic preferences or actual rules. But as adjectives that are going with a noun, these words work just the same as ze and zot and ele and elu. They match the noun in gender and number, they come after the noun, and if there is a he hayediah on the noun, there is also one on the demonstrative. And these words can be either near or far in space or also in time. And we see a lot in certain prayers in Judaism, we'll have words like bayom hahu or bayamim hahem, meaning on that day or in those days. And so these are days that are far away in time from the speaker. So of course, prayers are not always the best indicator of how modern Hebrew speakers use the language, but these words do work also in modern Hebrew. Now, all of this is fine and dandy if whatever this or that is a known noun with a known gender. But what if we don't know what something is or how to say it in Hebrew? A very common way to ask is, what is this? And for questions like this, we always use the masculine, ma ze. But the answer is usually going to match the gender of the noun, because now somebody is giving an answer and they know what the gender of that noun is. So we can say something like ze sefer, because sefer is a masculine noun, or zot tmuna, because tmuna is a feminine noun. And again, we could have said zot tmuna, zu tmuna. Whenever I say zot, you can pretty much always replace that with zo or zu. And for unknown people, we can just say mize, and that just means who is this? But we often know the gender of a person that we don't know who it is. And so if I see a man and I want to say who is this, I can say mize. But if I see a woman or a girl and I want to know who this person is, I can say mizot, because I can tell if I say mize and I'm talking about a woman, people are going to be confused. They're going to try to figure out what male person you are asking about. And as I mentioned, when you want to say something like this thing, whatever this thing is, the most common way is to use the he hayediah, the definite article, on both the noun and the demonstrative. So if I want to say this book, I'm going to say ha-sefer hazeh. If I want to say this picture, it's going to be hatmuna hazot. These books, hasfarim ha'ele. These pictures, hatmunot ha'ele or hatmunot ha'elu. So this structure, using the he hayediah on both the noun and on the demonstrative, also works for the faraway objects. So hasefer hahu, hatmuna hahi, hasfarim hahem, hatmunot hahen. Now, I have also noticed in higher register speech and higher register writing that you can delete both of the he hayediahs on noun phrases like this. So, but you have to delete it from both words. So you can say sefer ze, tmuna zot, sfarim ele, tmunot elu, or tmunot ele. Now, can this structure also be used with distant objects? To be honest, I do not know. I have never read or heard anybody say something like sefer hu or tmuna hi. And I don't know if it's because there are other uses for those words, who, he, hem, and hen, that might actually cause a sentence like that to be confusing. And therefore, people don't use it that way without the he hayediah. Or it's also possible that they do use it and I just haven't seen it. Distinctions like this are really subtle and they don't often make their way into the grammar books. I've gotten all the way through level 8 in my OPON and we have never talked about this. We have talked about using a construction like hasefer hazeh or hasefer hahu, but we have never talked about making a noun phrase with a demonstrative without the he hayediah. So 8 levels and they never thought it was important enough to discuss. Now, one other thing is that this or that does not always refer to an actual specific noun. Sometimes it just refers to a situation. So I can say something like, oh, this is not good, or I love this. And the this in those 2 sentences is not a specific thing. It's just this in general. So in these situations, we almost always use the masculine ze. So I would say something like ze lo tov or ani ohevet et ze to mean this is not good or I love this. We would never say zot lo tov or zot lo tova or ani ohevet et zot. That does not work for this as a situation. But there are a few phrases that do use zot instead of ze for talking about a situation. So if I want to say because of this, because of something that I was just talking about, I'm going to say biglal ze. But if I want to say in spite of this, that same situation I was just talking about, I'm not going to say lamrot ze, I say lamrot zot. And why? Why does that one get a feminine? Who knows? Nobody can ever explain why that is. These are just situations that you need to memorize or, just try to listen and copy native speakers. So that's it for today. Now you know all about how to use the demonstratives in Hebrew. If you have any questions or feedback, please leave it in the comments. And as always, if you have any grammar aspect that has you flummoxed, leave that in the comments and I will do my best to make a video. Hit like if you enjoyed this video and subscribe and hit the notification bell if you want to see more. Lehitraot papa'am aba'ah. See you next time.